So you spoke about aspects of neutrality that have been lost over the past century, in the sense of the Cold War. Can you speak to maybe aspects of those that you think can be most useful in neutrality and non-alignment going forward? What aspects could be brought back most usefully in the international system?
The most useful aspect of neutrality that we lost is the idea of neutralization. It's the idea that from the outside, you try to solve a area of the world where you have where you've got a contested part of the world, like a country, but it doesn't even need to be a country. It could be even just a territory that has, for historical reasons, conflicts or conflict going on or potential conflicts, and in order to solve it, the contestants make this territory neutral. With hopefully then the agreement of that territory as well, because otherwise it's going to break down. You know, you have a three-way negotiation basically between two powers and one state that then still needs to accept to be neutral. Take the example of Austria, where this was basically an agreement between the Soviet Union and the United States that we will both say yes to a neutral Austria, and Austria itself also said yes, let's do it, and thereby you could solve this problem of what do we do with Austria. And you had again an independent state that then started to really use neutrality efficiently, and today we're here where we are. We had similar things happening for Switzerland. You had similar ideas where it didn't work, like for Laos and Cambodia, and today we don't have that concept anymore, that this can be done, that great powers can meet and can make a territory neutral, but I think it would be useful again in the future.
Excellent. Can you talk about maybe in sort of an increasingly globalized world, what does neutrality or what a non-alignment, what are the greatest uses or potential kind of going forward as the world becomes more globalized, or how things with countries are more connected? Do you think there's increasing space or decreasing space for this kind of system?
What I'm seeing is you have different incentives in the international system for neutralities to emerge, for states to be neutral if they want to or if they have to, and it mainly depends upon the polarity of the system. How many powers or big powers do you have? We're now in a 30-year period where we basically have one. The United States of America, the hegemon, and in that environment, there's not a lot of incentive for countries to be neutral. Although we have seen a couple of those, which are especially the ones that are close to the former Soviet Union, to Russia, right, the former Soviet states that declare their neutralities. Moldova, Belarus is de facto neutral. Mongolia, on the other end, declares its neutrality in order to say, yeah, we don't want to be sucked into either sphere again. We want to do our own thing, the most conductive environment for neutralities to thrive is multipolarity, when you don't only have like one or two powers, when you have like three or four powers. And I think there's some sort of agreement in IR at the moment that we are moving towards a multipolar system, because America is like drawing back its presence in the world. Russia is stronger again than what it used to be, and China is emerging, and the European Union, depending on how it goes, might be a fourth pole, and in that environment there's a lot of breeding ground for this idea of let's use neutrality as a way to stay out of the orbit of any of those while still be useful and do our own thing.
Excellent. And then last question, you spoke on the example of China and this kind of discussion about neutrality. How does a country like China, or kind of a large power, factor into this discussion? What might neutrality mean in that case, and especially for cases like for the case of China in territories where there's still these issues of contention? How might that sort of play out?
My point with that one was that in the 18th century we have seen one of the largest power, if not the largest sea power at the time, using neutrality policies extensively, which was Great Britain, in order to further its interests, especially in building colonies. Then we have seen the United States using 150 years of neutrality before it became the dominant superpower. Those were great power neutralities, not what we understand today as small Austrian, Swiss or so on permanent neutrality. It was just a form of picking your fights. I want to be neutral towards this conflict, but not that one. That was the kind of neutrality that was being played. And if you look at the statements of China today in its white paper, it says we don't have military alliances. We discourage that. We encourage discourse, etc. And of course, that doesn't mean that China is a peaceful nation. But it means that it doesn't build alliances right now. So I just am saying that there is some sort of similarities of today's emerging China as a great power, how it plays its international security relations to what other great powers did in the past. And maybe there's a value in using this as an analytical framework to understand where China is headed.